Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, hey, thank you for tuning in. So today on the program, we have a great show planned for you, and everything seems to be, we finally seem to be working. Okay, so everyone, hey, sorry, a little bit of frazzle here, but we're getting our guests together. Everything should be okay. Why don't we go ahead and just open up the show? So one moment. Okay, yeah, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so everyone, hey, welcome into the Computer America Show. So today on the program, in the second part of the show, we will be doing computer and technology news. In the second part of the show, computer and technology news, where we cover everything computer technology related. Try to keep you up to date. It's going to be a lot of fun. And in the first, though, we will be doing, we will have a guest. And our guest will be none other than Mr. Agustin Lebron. And he wrote a book all about trading, the laws of trading. And hey, it's going to be a great guest, and I'm really looking forward to him. So, before we get started, first things first, computeramerica.com. That will be everything that you need to know, including a link to our guest website, any articles that we cover, anything that we show, anything and everything will be at computeramerica.com. Check that out. And also be sure to check out the articles. We have some new reviews up. You should definitely check it out if you haven't seen that, and more. Also, check out the live video feed if you would like to follow along and not just listen, but hey, watch Computer America instead. Okay, now, with that being said, everyone, we're going to go ahead and give our guest a call. Hopefully this goes okay. So I apologize real quick here. And let's see. So, and Augustine, how you doing? Are you there? All right, perfect. So you can hear me. So let's take you off mute so everyone else can. And Augustine, welcome onto the Computer America Show. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Yeah, so sorry about that. It just happens sometimes. But hey, happy that you could join us. And everyone, once again, he's the author of The Laws of Trading. And again, our guest for today. So glad that you could join us. And hey, so obviously, thank you for coming on the show. Why don't we go ahead and start with a bit of background? Is this your first book? What is your background, and how did you get into, or where did the idea to start writing this book come from?
Right. Yeah. So it is indeed my first book. My background is actually in engineering. I did electrical and computer engineering, and then I got a job as an engineer. I designed chips for cell phones and GPS receivers for a long time. And then I decided I wanted to do something different. And so I ended up finding a job as a trader, a quant trader and researcher. And that started in 2008, which was one heck of an education in financial markets at that time. And it proceeded from there.
Absolutely. And of course, 2008, that's, that still affects us even to today. And of course, it's you must have learned a lot in a very, very short period of time. So it's great. And so give us a quick overview of just trading and of course buying and selling. Obviously this is going to be a little bit more about markets than it is about our usual fare of just straight technology, but obviously technology has its roots in just about every field nowadays.
Absolutely.
What about trading? I guess the laws of trading, and what is it that you tried to outline in this book? Because that covers everything. For everyone out there watching the video portion, you say purchasing a car, ordering dinner, selling things on eBay, all trade. That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is.
What are you trying to hit with the book?
Yeah, so the book started with some of the training material that I put together to teach new traders. And as I was doing that over the years, I started to realize that a lot of the things that I was talking about were very broadly applicable. I think the laws of trading are not really something that I invented. I think that I sort of pieced them together. But you can see evidence for people understanding the laws of trading, way back. I mean, Shakespeare certainly understood the laws of trading, that's for sure. These are fairly universal things that happen anytime that you're in a competitive situation and you have to make good decisions. And I think that's basically what the book is about. And that's the thing that I'd like for your audience to understand, is that this isn't really about trading. It's about making better decisions. And that's pretty universal.
It certainly is, and I could definitely use a dose of that myself. Intended audience, and obviously you said that everyone, but do you feel like this is going to lean towards, because we have a pretty devout following of small business owners and people who have to make purchasing decisions for their companies. Is there anyone that you would think would really benefit a lot from, I guess the rules of trading, as you kind of mentioned?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you can start with the first one, which is the first rule that I have in the book is know why you're doing a trade before you trade. And I think that seems like kind of an obvious statement. But really, it's talking about your personal motivations, right? Like when you're actually making a decision, what's really primary, what's really important in your mind, and really getting that straight. Because as we all know, I think human beings are really good at fooling themselves about the things that they claim to value. And so really getting that straight in your head, and the book talks about how to do that, I think is just step one, really.
I got you. And by the way, for everyone out there who is checking out the website right now, the art style. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, I've not had a chance to read the book. It's definitely going to be on my reading list after this. But nice little comics and things like that. See that you obviously worked with an illustrator.
hmm
I mean, just talk about writing the book, finding an illustrator. I mean, how was the experience of just writing this whole thing?
Yeah, it's because it is my first book. I've learned so much about it. You start writing the book, and you're full of good ideas, and then you start to get into it, and you start to sort of question yourself, like, really, is this something that I'm going to be happy to have written once I'm done? Are people going to be interested in reading it? And you sort of reach this sort of trough of self-doubt in some sense, and then hopefully towards the end, as it happened with me, I start to sort of feel a little bit more confident, like, well, maybe I do actually want somebody to read this. And so the process of finding an editor and finding a publishing house, and it's really interesting. It's a very diverse set of skills, it turns out, that you need in order to sort of transform yourself into an author.
Certainly is the case, and you seem to have really put in a lot of effort here. So the first rule, like you said, know why you're doing the trade before you trade, and like you said, that is, I think it's vague enough that it could be applied to not just why am I buying stock, or why am I buying this. It can be really kind of applied to just about anywhere. Is there any way in trade, and going a little bit kind of off the questions here, but is there ever like a bad reason to kind of get into trading? Because some people say that if you just strictly do it for the money, if you just strictly do it on a hunch, if you just strictly do it for XYZ, is there a bad way to approach trading, either in stock market or in any kind of deal that that someone may try to make with you?
Right.
How do you make sure that you're not kind of entering a deal at a disadvantage already?
Right. Yeah. The idea of motivation, there's a lot of motivations that you see, especially among retail traders. Certainly this idea of boredom, honestly, like a lot of people, small business owners, people like that are just, they're comfortable. They have some time on their hands, and well, let's try this. Right. or maybe it's this idea of like trying to get a big score, like a kind of a lottery type payoff. A lot of people in retail trading talk about getting in the zone where kind of time melts away. And these are all reasons that even though people might tell you, oh, it's about the money, maybe these other things are more primary. And I'm not saying like people are wrong to sort of have these other motivations. By no means is that the case. But you have to understand that the people you're trading against are professionals and they don't have these motivations. They work within structures that sort of make the idea of making money the primary thing. And anytime that you're valuing an emotion or a feeling over a rational decision, probably you're losing and probably they're winning.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So first one, so we just covered the first rule. What are some of the other highlights? Because you have a lot of great advice in here. What would be maybe the next, kind of piece of advice that you would give people about trading?
Right. So another rule that I have that is on its face a lot about trading, but in fact has a lot of other kind of sequelae are this idea of you have to understand what your edge is. And if you can't describe your edge in 5 minutes, probably you don't have a very good one. So like, why is the trade that you're doing, why do you think that is a profitable thing to do? But when you start thinking about edge more broadly, it really gets into a lot about, well, what is it that you personally can do, or what is it you personally know and can do that other people cannot, right? Fundamentally, that is the source of anyone's edge, whether it's in trading or whether it's on the job market or anything like that. And again, being very clear-eyed about what it is that we're good at. Like, what's the thing that makes me really valuable? Sort of really lets you think about your decision-making process in a whole new light.
So, and this concept of an edge, this is something that I wanted to, of course, get into because you have, on your website, you have it here. Obviously, Holland back in the day with the tulips, the whole tulip industry that came crashing down. Who knew a system based on flowers wasn't a great idea?
Right.
That happened, and then the .com bubble you kind of outlined. And then cryptocurrency is an interesting one because that's a market that's still, I guess, kind of so volatile that, when it was $20,000, everyone's like, man, imagine if I bought into that 5 years ago. And then everyone lost money after they kind of jumped in, and now it's right back up. I mean, when you say finding your edge, is it about can you still have a good edge and still, I guess, kind of lose? Or is it if you stick to whatever your principle of, this is as far as I'm willing to take this investment, you hopefully won't ever end up in a situation where you're, I guess, fear of missing out or, whatever the term is.
Right. Yeah. The idea of kind of risk limits and how much are you willing to lose, I think is important as well. But I think this idea of edge, and especially in the context of cryptocurrency, is an interesting question. Like, it keeps going up, and so you buy in. Like, what is it that you've figured out about cryptocurrency that the marginal participant in the market hasn't? Right? Because there's a lot of people out there who sort of look at it and say, oh, it's gone up, and so it'll probably keep going up. But if you look at the history of financial products in general, that's usually not a very good reason to keep buying, right? Like the reason to do a trade is because there's something you figured out. There's something special that you understand about the world that other people don't, that gives you that edge. And honestly, in a lot of cases, especially towards the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018, a lot of people who were trading cryptocurrencies probably didn't have that edge. I mean, I remember my niece's friend, she came over and she does a lot of babysitting and sort of isn't really a tech person. And she said, oh yeah, I just invested in some cryptocurrency. And I thought, oh man, I think we're calling the top here, because if she's into it, then I think we're all in trouble.
Okay, so you found someone who is the theoretical furthest away from someone who should,
Right.
I guess, kind of know about the technology, and then once they've known about it, it kind of hits that point where hey, maybe there's some outside excitement that's not exactly justified, and
Exactly.
yeah, we definitely saw that as well, and just seeing the precipitous drop. I mean. And even right now, like it's kind of fortuitous that you come on the show, kind of when you did, because we just kind of hit, I think, just past 9,000, and then it fell in like the past 24 hours. It's increased by like, I want to say like 100% or something like that in the past like month alone.
Sounds right.
Yeah, it's kind of hitting that ride again, and it's funny because people don't hear about it when it's doing really bad or when it's just really not doing that much, and then everyone wants to jump on board. So you're saying it's not about kind of avoiding XYZ. It's about going in with reasonable expectations. Cryptocurrency can be one of those, I guess.
Exactly. It's just, again, it's down to what is it that you've understood about this market that other people have not, right? And I'm neither bullish or bearish myself long term on cryptocurrency. I think it's very high variance. And it's funny, actually. I think that the thing that's interesting about cryptocurrency right now, sort of as a big picture thing, not so much about its price, is the idea that they are slowly but steadily reinventing all of the machinery of real financial markets just in the crypto world. Like it used to be that, well, you had your own wallets, and you basically managed your own tokens, and so that was like keeping your money in a mattress, right?
Right.
But people started to realize that that was not a very safe thing to do, and so now they have them in online wallets, and so that's so okay. They reinvented banks, right? And so now and
Yeah.
now things like Tether, right? Like they're starting to reinvent fractional banking. Like there's all sorts of financial innovations we've created in the last 100 years, and I feel like crypto is recapitulating those faster, but they're getting back to where we're already at with real financial markets. So it's kind of humorous from my perspective.
It's something that we often ask our guests when they come on with a new product, and it's what because a lot of times they'll come up and the marketing side will do what they do best, and that's hype up a product, and we ask them what has changed in the past year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years that's allowed you to do this. And, because if they come on and say, we've built the best, let's just say walkie-talkie, what technological innovations happened? Is it better wireless standards? Is it better batteries? Is it XYZ? And if there's really not a good answer, if they just say, oh, we just do it better than everyone else, you start getting an idea that, oh, it's, probably more hype than it is actual innovation. So do you see that happening a lot where
that's
people buy
exactly
into that?
right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think those questions that you ask in that spot are exactly the kinds of things that I talk about when you say think like a trader, because I think you're right. Like a lot of time in the tech industry, which is where I spend most of my time consulting and that sort of thing, they're actually kind of confused themselves about their true source of edge. I mean, they have a great new idea, and often it really is a great idea, but they get seduced into thinking that they could execute on the idea, or if that the product got traction, incumbents couldn't easily duplicate it. And yeah, like people sort of lose sight of what it is that's sort of enabling new technologies.
Yeah, and you give some great examples. I mean, here's a comic that you have with Kodak. Obviously, they went all in on film back in the day, and we all know how digital cameras kind of took off. Obviously, looking at this and looking. Well, let me ask you this. You're pulling some great examples from the past, but and I'm sure that you could also say things like 3D TV and what have you. Is this something that companies from today, because we're having massive IPOs, we're having Ubers and all these different social media companies come online that are raking in billions of dollars. Can people who are looking at this, either thinking about investing or starting their own business, can we learn from the past and, really understand something that, or is let's say, what happened with Kodak, just kind of, Kodak story, and we can't learn
Right.
anything from that?
No, I mean, the example of Kodak, I think, is great. And it's been examined a lot. I'm certainly not the first person to point it out. I mean, Clay Christensen's sort of creative destruction kind of idea, a lot of it was born out of this event. But I think the idea that companies, one of the costs that companies don't really have a good way of kind of quantifying and analyzing is this idea of opportunity cost. What is the thing that I'm not doing that I should be doing? And there are lots of attempts at it, but I think we still, honestly, as a society and as a set of businesses, don't really have a great sense of that. And the cool thing is in trading, I think probably we've come closest to a reasonable account of opportunity cost compared to other places. This idea that opportunity cost over the long term, this really is your biggest cost, right? Like if you have a profitable business, the thing that's going to kill you is probably just a thing you didn't notice coming, right? In the book, I talk about how to structure your operations so that opportunity cost is sort of tangible instead of hidden, right? Like that you can actually see what it is you're giving up by still doing what you're doing.
That is very interesting, and I guess To me, that sounds like never be satisfied with what you have, because I will say, just like running, let's say, Computer America, we have been, we've been on the air for, February 1991. That is 28 years now, or something like that.
Wow.
And thank you. And so 28 years, and that's in an industry such as radio. We've seen some changes. We saw the internet coming, and obviously with us being on computers and technology, we knew very early we had to have a website. We had to have our show available online, and at the same time, I kind of have to force myself, because I also help with kind of the syndication, that kind of thing. We love radio. We love the platform. But we have to kind of force ourselves to say, even though we've been on the air for 28 years, we got to look at online, and we have to see what new podcast services are out there. We have to see how people are watching. We have to make sure that we're available on YouTube. Is that what you're, I guess, kind of asserting, is that, just because something's been working doesn't mean you can't, kind of make, you mentioned that, the cost of doing business, it's changing behind my back, whether or not, whether I keep up with it or not. Is that kind of along those lines?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, and the last law that I have in my book is exactly that thing that you just put your finger on, is the idea that if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, right? Like, this is a competitive world, and whatever it is you're doing today that's working for you, over time, that's going to become, in the trading world, less profitable, but certainly everywhere else as well. And part of the thing is, you can think of that as some sort of depressing idea, right? Like, oh, what's the point of pushing the boulder up the hill knowing it's going to fall back down again, right? It sounds depressing, but I want people to consider the counterfactual, right? Like, imagine a world where your ideas, your products, the things you do never become stale, never become unprofitable, never need updating, always do great in the market. And every day you come in and you push the buttons and shuffle the papers on those ideas and those products. And there's no point in looking for new stuff, because the current stuff still makes as much money as ever. For me, I can't imagine a worse hell than being stuck in a job destined to do the same thing over and over again. And so the interest and the joy and the calling of the job is in that quest to improve, right? To get better. The quote that I always like to cite about it is John F. Kennedy's speech in 1962 about the Apollo moon program, where he says, and I'm not going to do the Boston accent, but we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, and of course, if you don't push yourself, then you end up in a position like, no offense, Intel, friends of the show, but Intel or Apple, where, hey, you're the market leader for 10 years, and then you're blindsided by, let's say, AMD, who's able to come in a couple $100 under you and, kind of beat you to research and development. And not just AMD. In the Intel example, you've got, obviously, Intel's been trying to push into the mobile phone space for God knows, probably forever, and they still really haven't made much of a foothold. And then NVIDIA came out and they just started crushing it with GPUs, and that's another thing where, again, they kind of got caught flat-footed. Like, there's a lot of examples, in Intel's case in particular, of adjacent markets that they kind of missed. Yeah, it's just it's so easy when you're the leader, and everyone just assumes that, if you want X, you go to Intel. But hey, we like what Intel does when they do have healthy competition, and when people do strive to change things up. So this may be a little late in the conversation to kind of ask this, but what does this book have to kind of do with tech, if you were just to kind of summarize that? Because we have talked a lot about tech, but how is this kind of tech oriented to begin with?
Right. Well, I think the thing that connects me to tech, again, the consulting that I do in my sort of daily life is, in fact, doing this very thing, like connecting some of these ideas in trading back to tech companies, medium-sized software companies, that sort of thing. Because I think tech pretty clearly has a not invented here problem, where if they haven't figured it out, then it doesn't exist. And you start to talk to people about slightly different ways of approaching managing projects, managing their software efforts in some specific cases. And you teach them some of these different ideas, and they're very open to them. Oh, we didn't know that existed. And so that's definitely a kind of a big picture thing. I think tech can learn a lot from the world of trading, and vice versa, as trading has learned from the world of tech. So that's one angle. The other angle, I think, is this idea of data, of machine learning, of data science, that I think it's the important business story of the last 5 years, and probably will be for the next 5, right? Like, how do you use data, analytics, all these technologies? But the thing is, again, financial markets, we've been living in this new world of data and analytics for 2 decades already. So like people have this image of trading as people shouting at each other. But that hasn't been true for 15 years. I mean, the New York Stock Exchange is just a data center across the Hudson River in Carteret, New Jersey. It's all machines.
Yeah, I've heard some technology which I don't know how accurate it actually is, but obviously they say that the reason you want to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, for instance, is that is the immediacy of it. You can call out and buy shares and sell shares and blah blah blah. But online trading is really where a lot of it happens, and then on top of that, automated trading, where they look for certain thresholds. They work in microseconds or milliseconds, as opposed to waiting for even the words to come out of your mouth. People have already completed trades online.
For sure.
It is, and this has always been fascinating for me, because how does the average person compete when you have giant financial institutions or just players who are invested wholly into not just trying to do soothsaying and seeing into the future and making good investments, but making the act of trading as efficient as possible? Because if I'm sitting here with some kind of trading application up on my computer, how am I ever going to compete in this world where people are trading, again, as efficiently as possible with millions or billions of dollars in research and development?
Well, and I think the short answer is you're not. And the most important evidence I can give you for that is the fact that those professionals that you just mentioned, most of the time when a retail trader puts in an order on their retail trading platform, whether it's Interactive Brokers or Robinhood or E-Trade or whatever, the professionals are actually competing to trade against those orders. That's how much the professionals think that the retail traders are don't have information, right? That they're willing to pay the brokerage house for the right to trade against those orders. I think that's all the evidence you need to understand that probably you shouldn't be trying to compete with them, right? Again, you should try to find your personal edge. And for the vast majority of people, take it from somebody who's been inside the machine, you probably shouldn't be trading. You shouldn't be day trading. It's kind of a thing that you're not going to hear very many people say, because there's not a lot of vested interest in telling people trade less. But in fact, 99% of the time, that is what people should do. Personally, I'll tell you right off the bat, I only look at my retirement accounts and that sort of thing. I look at them at most a couple times a year. I don't need to look at them any more often than that.
I have heard, and that's a shame, because my second dream job would be a day trader. Just the idea of watching money and watching it grow and having educated guesses, which is really the best anyone has, and trying to, I think of it like playing poker, but everyone really respects it, I guess, because hey, if you do well, you're seen as intelligent and you get a lot of money for it. But I have heard that if you really wanted, the best way to invest money in the past 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever years was just to put everything into, some kind of Dow blue chip stock, whatever, and then just sit on it and do nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the best way, I've heard.
Absolutely. I definitely believe that. I think the poker analogy is really good. I think, if you're at a table with 9 other people and they're not very good, then you should be playing poker. But you should think of the stock market as one giant table where all of the best players in the world always are there, and they have super deep stacks, right? Those are the people you're playing poker against. And I think, people always ask me, what's your advice? How should I think about trading? What should I do? And it's really boring. My answers, people aren't satisfied with them, but I think they're the best answers that I can give, which is, one, maximize the benefit you get from tax advantage investing, right? Don't give Uncle Sam any more money legally than you have to. That's rule number 1. Max out 401ks, max out Roths, max out 529s. Number 2, really just minimize costs, right? A lot of people, especially in their 401ks, they might have, some default thing. Probably that default thing, you're paying more fees than you should, right? If you're if you're in something that is tracking the S&P 500, there's no reason for you to be paying more than 1% per year, right? That's just an insanely large amount of money to be paying in fees. And so it just kind of devolves from that. There's nothing special about it. It's kind of boring, but That's kind of the important stuff.
Yeah, that and hey, boring means steady. Steady means hey, you're not going to be surprised by a lot. So, and I will say that we are actually coming up to a break, and I'm wondering if you'd like to stay over just so we can finish our conversation because we really haven't touched a lot on things like AI and automated trading. So, would you mind staying over?
Yeah, by all means, sure.
Perfect. So everyone, so we're going to go to break here in about 10 seconds. So, but when we come back, we're going to talk about this idea of building systems that do automated trading and how, hey, that sounds kind of familiar. And I think I heard something about that happening where it kind of led to the 2008 financial crisis, and things were kind of selling head over heels. So everyone, hey, we're talking to, of course, Mr. Agustin Lebron, and he is, of course, an author of The Laws of Trading. If you want to check that out, we'll have a link in the show notes. Everyone, we'll be right back. More Computer America right after this. Stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. We are, let me see here, change one thing real quick. And we are 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And everyone, hey, thank you for continuing on with Computer America. If you miss any of our conversations so far with Mr. Agustin, you can of course check us out wherever podcasts are heard, and you can find today's entire show beginning to end. You can time shift us, listen to us on your commute, and of course, if you can't catch us live here on the radio, it's the second best way to do it. So everyone, we continue on the laws of trading, and thank you so much for continuing on with us. So obviously, just getting into automation, and this is something that I guess kind of touches on what you were talking about with machine learning, artificial intelligence. If people have such a hard time understanding this, I think getting a machine to maybe think like a person, or maybe you can correct me in saying that machines are actually better at analyzing trades than people are, but understanding the markets, the influences, things behind it, there's a lot of data and there's a lot to understand, and computers aren't exactly well known for understanding. They're good at doing things and being very mechanical about it. What goes into building systems that do automated trading? And one second. I'm sorry. 1 second, and there we go. All right. I'm sorry. Please start over.
No worries. So yeah, I think it's definitely true that humans and machines are good at different things, right? Mm-hmm. Machines are good at doing sort of a very repetitive thing, really reliably and really fast by and large. And humans, at least well-trained humans, are perhaps better at thinking of things they didn't know they needed to think of. It's kind of, in the context of trading, probably the best way to put it. And so in practice, at least in my experience, the thing you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out, for a given trade, for a given strategy, you're trying to get the best out of both worlds. And so how do you partition the work between the machine and the human in order to sort of maximize the value out of each? And really, I think the best trades, the best strategies that I've seen do that the best.
Makes sense. And obviously this is only going to kind of get better as more data gets funneled into these systems. And this is something that we've talked about in the future with machine learning. That's what happens when these systems are so complex that they can analyze so much data so quickly, and it could be real-time input and that kind of thing. What happens when human traders become obsolete to these systems that are run by massive trading firms? Is there something that we need to be worried about there, that technology can outpace people to the point where if you're an ordinary person, you have no choice but to go with someone who has one of these systems are already established?
Yeah, I think you can sort of look at it a couple of different ways. One is certainly, I'm a pretty firm believer that the things that human traders are really, really good at, the really high value things, are still just as valuable as ever. But it is definitely true that machines sort of interact with each other in an automated way much more than they used to. I mean, the classic example, recent example of this is the flash crash, where a bunch of machines sort of started to do fairly sensible things, and so other machines started to do what on paper seemed like sensible things to react to those other machines doing things, but the feedback loop that was caused ended up doing some fairly crazy things in the market in a very short amount of time. So this idea of these feedback loops where individual strategies are doing sensible things, but the emergent properties of the group of things is not sensible. I think that is a thing that we're going to see more and more of. And to their credit, U.S. exchanges and the SEC have done pretty good work in terms of trying to put some circuit breakers in and new features that limit the damage of that stuff. But it's still kind of a concern that you're going to see over time.
We can certainly hope so, because those flash crashes, you don't want those happening every other day. So
right.
with that being said, and right there I mentioned AI a couple times. You mentioned that the AI for the past 5 years, the story of data has been kind of one of the big stories going on, and it will be for the next 5 years. What do you see as is kind of what's so important about being able to not just collect data on such a massive scale? Because I think that's something that we've noticed here on Computer America when we talk to these companies. We have to ask the questions like, why is it that your application needs to know where I am or when I'm sleeping or things like that? And it's just that every company out there has these treasure troves of data from all of us. And if you have, and really, I think companies are willing to sacrifice immediate profit, or, you could look at things like Twitter or Uber or any other, a lot of other companies out there. They'll sacrifice profit for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, which any startup company should never have been able to do, just to get a user base, just to get access to data, just so they'll be able to say, hey, we may be 6 years in the red and never turn a profit, but now let's say look at Twitter, we're worth a couple $2 billion. And that's because they have access to what people are saying, what people are doing. And now we live in a day and age where that's almost more valuable than being able to make money. And I guess the question to you is, again, what is the end result of just a data-driven economy as opposed to any kind of profit or making a product?
Right. So it's an interesting question. I might sort of turn that on its head a little bit. I think, and this is an article that appeared in Wired, I want to say like 20 some odd years ago, but it was very, like, I remember it all the time, which is we're moving more towards an attention-based economy. Because once you have somebody's attention, if you understand enough about them, you can basically just kind of make them buy whatever they want, whatever you want them to buy, or do whatever you want them to do. I think we have plenty of evidence, various Facebook scandals over the past 5 years, that that's true. But the thing about the data that I think is interesting is it's mostly valuable because of the network effect. Like, I think there's a lot of winner-take-all sorts of behaviors associated with data. Like, if Google and Facebook and a few others have enough data, they can basically sort of just win by having your attention.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of other startups have looked at that model and said, well, if we become Google too, then we'll be able to do that. But it's like I don't know if you watch South Park at all, but the underpants gnomes. Step 1 was grab the underpants. Step 2 was question mark, and step 3 was profit.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's like the data gnomes now, where step 1 is grab the data, step 2 is question mark, and step 3 is profit. For Google and for Facebook, step 2 is not question mark. They know exactly what they're doing. But for a lot of other people, a lot of people that I talk to in my consulting work, honestly, step 2 is just question mark, right? And people have to have a good account for step 2 before they even try this.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense, and of course you get back into the conversation we had earlier about what is your edge, and how do you invest and things like that. I mean, all of this put together, and actually I take it back. We have another question here. What data is important and valuable when you're building, of course, these models? And we've seen this where. And it's not just about having X amount of data, because really I think machines have gotten to the point where if you just want data, you could just create data. That's not really a big deal. It's about how recent is the data, how fresh is the data, and how pertinent is the data. Because if you're trying to find out what people like to, where people like to drive, where they like to eat, where they like to spend their time, data from within the past month or two is much more valuable than it is in the past 5 years.
Sure.
What data is really valuable? Is it all about pertinency, or is it all about just what's valuable to you?
No, you're exactly right. Like, people think to themselves, oh, well, let's just grab all the data we can. And the analogy I always give people is, if I want to know what temperature it is outside of my house in the morning, I mean, I could have a thermometer and it could tell me a temperature, or I could have 100 thermometers scattered around my house, right? Like, I have 100 times more data. They don't really have 100 times more information about how cold it is outside in the morning, right? And I think this idea of what data is pertinent, I think, is the number one question that companies get wrong most consistently about this sort of the world in which they're living. And my rule of thumb here is the data that's most pertinent for a given process, like a trading strategy or something like that, are past outputs of the same or similar strategies, right? So, like, if my strategy produces, some trades, then probably the most important information that I need to give it is past trades. If I am building a digital ad platform, or I'm trying to build a digital ad strategy, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what data do I need to know? Probably the thing that I need to know most is results of that strategy from the past, right? This idea that the past outputs of my system are the most important thing that informs future versions of that system. And this principle is, like, it's not that I made it up. It's basically the core of what's known as reinforcement learning, right? Like, this is how you sort of use the past to bootstrap your knowledge about the future. It's just you can apply this principle much more broadly when you think about it.
Well, and at the same time, though, again, you can find it there on your website, lawsoftrading.com. Anyone, if you want to go check it out. But you have, I think it's law number 8. Just because something has never happened before doesn't mean it can't happen. Is that where the human part comes in? Because you can, of course, say that, hey, here's what happened in the past, and here's what we can kind of expect, but you, I guess, expect the unexpected to be cliche, but you have to take it a step further, and you can't just take the past as written in stone. I guess
that's exactly right, and then that is absolutely where sharp, well-trained, and creative humans, and I want to emphasize the creativity part, because trading does require a certain level of baseline paranoia that in normal life would probably be considered kind of unhealthy. But in the world of trading is actually quite healthy. And part of that paranoia is some pretty good creativity about all the things that could possibly go wrong. And not so much possibly go wrong, but all the weird things that could conceivably happen, even if they haven't before, just because they're not explicitly ruled out by the laws of physics. I mean, I think probably one of the first examples that I can think of off the top of my head for this is the 1987 crash, where if you look back, one of the important reasons that that crash happened was a phenomenon called portfolio insurance, where some companies basically sold some funds and that sort of thing, some protection against crashes. And the act of selling protection for those crashes and kind of hedging that risk causes crashes to happen and makes them worse when they do. Just this weird feedback effect of like something's never happened, but enough people relying on it never having happened actually makes it likelier to happen.
That's actually very interesting. And of course, yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just not the best idea to incentivize a really bad thing, or, I guess kind of pay up. But hey, no, we see that happen all the time with life insurance and whatnot. So it makes perfect sense. So with that being said, let's go ahead and, I want to ask this last question, and then I wanted to, kind of poke your brain about being an author as well. Big picture, why decision making? Because there's a lot of different topics you can cover here. You seem very well versed in, in the economy and markets and trading and technology. We just had a gentleman on this Tuesday, who spends 8 hours a day with an analyst firm who simply researches mobile phones and mobile phone system, carriers, everything about mobile phones. My point is that there are a lot of niches that you can, write a book about or just really dive into. Why did you feel like decision making was, I guess something that was broad enough that it would appeal to a lot of people, and then specific enough that you would have, I guess, good advice on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the thing, if I look back on my career, it's the thing that I always keep coming back to as being the thing that I enjoy about my job or whatever it is I'm doing at that time is the act of making decisions, and evaluating the process by which I made decisions in order to do it better, right? Like being a design engineer, going back to what I used to do, a lot of being a design engineer is, you have to make decisions without having full information, right? You're making decisions under some amount of uncertainty, and sort of being good at combining your prior beliefs, we'll call them your intuitions, because those are important, with data, sort of combining the best of the two is where the best decisions get made. And it turns out that basically it's the same process in trading. And I argue in the book that it's the same process in a lot of other places. And it is worth noting that a lot of the modern economy is going to a very explicitly trading-based model of how the economy works. Like digital ads are purely a trading venue now. Uber drivers are traders. Fundamentally, that's what they're doing. Whenever they turn on their phone, they're basically trading their time for some unknown result, right? And the better Uber drivers are the better traders of their time for that unknown result. And we're doing it too as Uber clients, right? Like it's just everything's going towards this sort of many-to-many exchange sort of model. So that's why I think there's a lot of value there.
And by the way, while we were talking here in the background, I went and found that article that you mentioned from Wired, the Attention Shoppers, I believe is the title, back in December 1st, 1997, about the new economy and the attention economy. And hey, very, very interesting article. We'll go ahead and throw that up in the show notes as well. Just,
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, 20 years ago, they expected, the flow of attention becomes more important. So will the internet and lessening role of organizations, but at the same time, everyone have their website, and very interesting. So thank you for turning me on to that. Okay, now, so your book sounds very, very interesting. And before we get to, where you can find it and things like that, I wanted, sometimes when people come on, they, sometimes they start their own businesses, they start their own companies. And I also like to, see if they have any advice for anyone who would like to start a business. For you, I wanted some advice on anyone out there who is interested in writing a book, because hey, it's not easy. There's a reason that we give so much respect to authors, is because you really have to, you really have to know your stuff. You as soon as you start to, I guess, kind of make stuff up or just say, oh, because I'm right, you get into like op-ed, and it's just not a very good book anymore.
That's right.
If someone wanted to write their own book, what are some of the key advice that you would give them? Is it all about just sitting down 8 hours a day and writing something down? What helped you actually write a book?
So I think the thing that I learned, I think every first author learns this later than they should. And so I might as well say this is you really have to think very, very hard about who you're writing the book for. Like, who is your target audience? Because I think a book can go in any number of different directions. Especially if you're feeling inspired on a given day, you just start writing words on a page. And, probably you should do some of that, but it has to be tempered with this idea that this mythical author, this mythical reader, the person who's reading this book, are they interested in this? Is this going to help them? Is this going to make them want to read the book? So yeah, be very sort of cognizant of who it is you're writing for. I think that would be thing number one. And then thing number two, exactly like you said, it's very easy for books to just turn into, well, here's what I think about this and here's what I think about that, right? And so having the discipline, I think the best nonfiction authors that I like to read, Tim Harford is definitely one of them, Tyler Cowen's another one. They sort of back up their arguments and their beliefs with pretty unassailable evidence. And I think finding that evidence can take time and can be hard, but I think it's critical for a useful book.
Makes perfect sense. And then the other question I wanted to ask you was there anything about this whole process that maybe caught you off guard, you weren't expecting? Because, hey, it's just a book. There are millions of books out there. How hard can it be? Was there anything about writing a book that caught you off guard?
Well, I think caught me a little bit off guard is you think to yourself, well, I've written the book and I've gotten past the hurdle of writing it, and I've gotten past the second hurdle of having a publisher accept it and be happy with it. You think, okay, good, I've got it done.
Yeah.
But no, your work is just beginning because now people have to buy the book, and so it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of marketing that, as a trader, you're sort of constitutionally averse to publicity, and so I've definitely personally had to adapt to the reality that I've got to go out there and sell this book. At least I've got to try anyway.
Yeah, no, and of course that's why you're here on the show, and that's something that we try to specialize in, because we're not trying to trick you. We're not trying to trick anyone in our audience to say you have to buy this book because this is going to change your life. It's that you put a lot of work into this. This is something that you have put a lot of effort, and this is something that you think people should know about. This is something that people should definitely know about. And the only way they're going to know about it is if you bring attention to it. And that's what we like to do here, is to bring attention to, ideas, books, products, services that we like.
No, yeah.
So
I'm glad for the opportunity to do so. I mean, as you can tell, I definitely believe in the message of the book. And I do think that, even if you read the whole book and you only get one or two little nuggets out of it that you can apply to your own life, I mean, I think that that's already a win for me, certainly.
Absolutely. So, and with that being said, I'll let you go ahead and have the last word. If people want to find out more about you, your book, your writing, where would be the best place to go?
So you can go to lawsoftrading.com, which is where the website that you mentioned, that's where all the nice cartoons are. And you can find me on Twitter, Agustin Lebron 3. I don't know who 1 and 2 are, actually. Or you can, at the bottom of the website, you can email me. I love starting conversations. I love talking to people. So, drop me a line with comments, complaints, ideas. Let's have a conversation.
All right, perfect. And hey, we'll go ahead and put links to all of that right there on Computer America in the show notes. But Augustine, this was a great conversation. And I'm really I say this all the time behind the scenes, but authors are honestly my favorite guests to have on the show, because no offense to all the product managers and CEOs that we have on the show, but something about authors, they really dig into a topic and they really understand it front and back, and it's always fun. So again, thank you for coming on the show and talk about your book.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Thank you.
Our pleasure. So everyone, once again, The Laws of Trading, check it out. Available on Amazon and of course lots of other places. And until next time, have a great one. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. So there he goes. And hey, that was a great conversation. If you want to check that out, again, you can go ahead to wherever podcasts are heard and you can find today's program. So with that being said, we have like 5 minutes left. We're going to do a little bit of computer technology news as much as we can. And then, hey, we're out for the day. So only enough time for a handful of stories. Let's go ahead and get started with computer and technology news. Here we go. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and talk about, how about this one? So No, unfortunately. Let's talk about some hardware. So often it's so easy to come on to the technology portion and get angry about, and get angry about this or the other. But let's talk about some hardware. Yes. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about this story where Ars Technica, atomically thin material could cut need for transistors in half, which is, hey, that sounds amazing. This is something that these technological breakthroughs really end up being, what drives the next generation of technology, because unfortunately, we've really figured out our current set of processors and transistors and things like that. We need something really revolutionary to kind of push us past a certain level. So let's go ahead, get started talking about this. It can and or logic in a single transistor, which switch states using light. So I don't know how far we're going to be able to get into this, but we're going to attempt our best. And then if we don't finish, you can find it in the show notes. But with the development of carbon nanotubes and graphene, scientists were given an entirely new collection of materials to work with. Sheets and tubes that could be consistently made with the thickness of roughly those of individual atoms, which we've talked about graphene, we've talked about carbon nanotubes and stuff like that. Very, very impressive, but at the same time, graphene, as we joke, can do anything but leave the laboratory. This can lead to a lot of innovation. It's just a matter of actually producing these materials on a massive scale. That's going to be the hard part. So far, most of the attention has gone to recreating new versions of familiar devices, but a new paper by a group of researchers in Shanghai looks into what can be done if you're not constrained by the sorts of devices we currently make in silicon. The result is a device that can perform basic logic in half the transistor silicon needs, can be switched between different logical operations using light, and can store the output of the operation within the device itself. Very, very cool. So we're going to, and the first one should be very obvious. This one can be or, and, meaning that if you know anything about transistors, they can be 0 or 1. They can be one of two outputs. But because these things are because they're so thin, they can do it in half the space. Looks like they can actually consist of and. They can be they can be a 0 or a 1 or both at the same time. We've talked about this with quantum computers. It's what makes them so much faster. Here in the article, they mentioned transistors made of an atomically thin material can be fundamentally different structures, saying that to test some of these, the researchers used, I can't even begin to say those chemicals. They said that they form graphene-like sheets slightly thicker than its component atoms. And this allows for the layer to take input from two different sources, making it a direct match for the logical operations input. Very, very cool. So by, of course, layering them, you can get not just one or the other, but both at the same time. They found that they can also make extremely similar devices that perform different logical operations, meaning that initially, with just a few sheets stacked, they formed a single semiconductor layer that could switch to conducting only the gates of both above and beyond. This makes it a perfect match to the AND function. That means that as far as we understand technology, this is just adding to it and giving us even more options. Now, we have like a minute left. We're not going to be able to finish this. Skipping ahead a little bit, light and memory, saying at this point, the paper switched into something like, but wait, there's more. One demonstration was that it's possible to switch an AND device into something that performs OR operations using the right wavelength of light. The gist of this is that the input gates work by exciting electrons within the sheets into a state that they contribute to carrying current. In a thin layer, both inputs have to be pushing electrons into the conduction band to get the current flow. This gives us an AND function. So essentially, by changing the wavelength, you can change the input, you can change the output, and you can, of course, store it within the atoms themselves. That's really, really, really incredible. So with that being said, how many transistors do we really need? Saying that overall the work serves as a good reminder that atomically thin material have distinctive properties compared to things that we're already working with. Cutting the number of transistors needed for the basic logic operations in half seems like a good way to significantly reduce the complexity of chips. To an extent, the light-based switching demonstration here runs counter to that, since access to the transistor has to be maintained for light to pump into it. Still, there are probably some cases where optical circuitry is integrated into a chip that this might actually be useful. So while this is of course complicated and it's going to add to our current understanding, at the same time though, this is not going to really fundamentally change a lot because, hey, it changes really everything. So everyone, there we go. We only had time for the one article, and I wanted to do something a bit, a bit hard in the science, but it was a lot of fun. Everyone, we're flat out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Computer America. It's been a lot of fun. And if you would like to check out anything that we do, computeramerica.com, really want to drive that home. Special thanks to our guest once again about the laws of trading. You can check that out in bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and more. And everyone, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us here on Computer America. And be sure to tune in tomorrow when we talk to Nathan Evans. Everyone, be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.